Hi, Dr. P here to talk about some common mistakes of game designers, both video and tabletop. And there's a list. It happens to be a list of 10, but that's just an arbitrary number. And these are not listed in a particular order. It's not that the first one I talk about is the most important. They're all important. And a weak conception to begin with is a common mistake. This is not the same as a weak idea. Whether you have a good idea or a weak one, you can screw up the details of the conception, which is to say, of turning the idea into a framework for a game. Now, the weak idea will probably show itself to be weak, although it's certainly true that there are games that are weak ideas but are still successful and popular. Of course, if the designer doesn't recognize that the idea is weak, that could be another common mistake. Early poor decisions that aren't reversed. This is a problem with most creative endeavors. Some of the mistakes listed here are reasons for this, such as self-indulgence and holding on to something that should be removed from the game, or not recognizing that an idea is weak, or having a poor conception. Insufficient time spent. A game is a project kind of like Rome, not built in a day. Now, people can think of exceptions, especially in little video games. The problem of releasing a game before it's ready may be less common now than it used to be, because developers have more experience. But it's still the case that companies that can delay a game 6 months or a year because they don't think it's ready will tend to make better games in the long run. Another way to think about this is you can't get 9 pregnant women together and have a baby in a month. It takes 9 months. That's just the way it is. Team not working together. Lots of people value individualism before teamwork, but that rarely works well in video game development. Now, teams tend to be much smaller in tabletop production. Often there's just one person who designs the game until manufacturing time, when other people become involved to make the files that are then sent to the actual manufacturer. Another common mistake is holding on to something that should be lost. Sometimes this may even be the original reason for making the game. Yes, you've made a game and it fits together, but the original reason has kind of got lost or doesn't quite fit. You've got to get rid of it. If it doesn't work, you've got to lose it. Of course, first you need to recognize that this is a potential problem, and then you need to recognize it when it actually happens. Too complex. Now, not everybody will agree with me here, especially the people who make puzzles rather than actual games. My motto is, a designer knows he has achieved perfection, not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Another form is about Japanese gardening. Your garden is not complete until there is nothing else that you can remove. Another form, everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. Albert Einstein. As I say, people who make puzzles sometimes make the puzzles more complex in order to make the solutions more difficult. But puzzles are not games, and games are not puzzles, even though many things that we call games are actually puzzles. Self-indulgence must be avoided. You can't think you're heaven's gift to the world, that you're blessing the world with your brilliance. And this is at the root of several of these mistakes, of course. Here's an analogy. Think of movies where the director is also the writer. Sometimes this works out really well. For example, the 2 mummy movies at the turn of the century. Sometimes it works badly. Star Wars: The Last Jedi, where the writer-director made a movie for himself, not for Star Wars fans. But that same writer-director succeeded with Knives Out, which is a mystery movie and quite far removed from Star Wars. Another problem can be not enough different testers. Now, years ago, we'd have talked about companies that only use their own employees as testers, and that was deadly. But that's rare now. Nonetheless, sometimes games are only play tested by people who are likely to really like them. That's not good enough. You need a broad group, including people who might not be part of your target market. It is not bad if some people who playtest your game are not particularly keen on it if they're not in fact in your target market. Insufficient playtesting and modification in general is a problem. And I'm going to read a quotation from Sir Winston Churchill, who wrote many books. And I'm going to compare games to books, as I often do. Quote, writing a book is an adventure. To begin with, it is a toy and an amusement. Then it becomes a mistress, and then it becomes a master, and then a tyrant. The last phase is that just as you are about to be reconciled to your servitude, you kill the monster and fling him out to the public. Unquote. The same can be said about a game, and that last phase of servitude is all about playtesting. You'll get sick of it if you do enough playtesting. Now, one of the mistakes that people make that I'm going to mention specifically is relying only on metrics. That is, in video games, you put the video game out in early beta or alpha or whatever, pre-release, and you keep count of what people do and use those metrics to decide how to change or modify the game. Well, this usually results in a pretty soulless game. And the notion that you can do this and succeed is terribly flawed. Publisher interference or changes. How common is it that the publisher forces changes in a game? It certainly happens. I heard a video game producer say years ago she spent most of her time fighting off interference from upper management marketing who wanted to change the game. Of course, this doesn't apply to self-publishing, which may be one reason why that's popular now. There are lots of mistakes that can be made. This is only a sampling, a start. Thanks for listening.